Good morning. You're watching Outsiders, the highest rating show on daytime Sky and the only show in the world where you get James Morrow, you get Rita Panahi, you get Rowan Dean, and best of all, if that's not enough for you, you get the next Prime Minister of Britain, possibly, Nigel Farage.
Good morning.
Nigel, welcome to Outsiders. Thank you so much for coming on. Fantastic performance at CPAC last night. You did a stand-up panel with Peter Credlin, Mark Latham, Mark Meadows. It was absolutely riveting, stand-up ovation. The thing here is it's a fascinating conundrum, Nigel, because the only thing that stands between you and the Prime Ministership of Britain is the thing you fought all your life to achieve, Brexit.
Yeah.
Brexit happens, you don't become PM necessarily. If Brexit doesn't happen, you do.
Hang on, I spent 27 years campaigning for Brexit when it was a very unfashionable thing to do. I was considered to be a complete nutcase. I mean, I still am by some, but you know, I was campaigning for something that wasn't even on the political agenda.
Yep.
Right? I fought for it, gained ground, got David Cameron to promise a referendum that he never thought he'd have to deliver, and then never thought he could possibly lose. I promise you, Boris has taken my playbook. You know, the European elections this year, I set up the Brexit Party. Within 6 weeks, we won this incredible victory. Boris has taken the playbook, word for word. I promise you, if he delivers a clean break Brexit on the 31st of October, I will be delighted, because I will have won.
Absolutely.
And politics isn't all about getting titles, rank and position. Politics is about principle. It's about changing things. Provided my country becomes independent and free, that's what matters.
Now, tell us the journey from Brexit, because you set up UKIP,
Yep.
and then you've set up the Brexit Party, huge
Yep.
success. If Brexit happens, I've always said I still think you will end up in Downing Street and you will be the one, because I don't think you can trust necessarily the Tories. Tell us your Brexit journey briefly from UKIP to Brexit and what's going to happen in these next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, UKIP was slowly growing, and suddenly we sort of exploded in 2011, 12, 13. Why? Because we'd open up the door unconditionally to 10 former communist countries. We were told that migration would run at about 10 to 15,000 a year, and it ran at like a couple of 100,000 a year. And it just wasn't sustainable. It drove wages down. It really dislocated communities in towns and cities. So that was the real key. That pushed it up. When we got to the referendum, and we won the referendum, and both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn both promised in the general election that followed, vote for us, we will honour the result of the referendum. Do you know something? Naively, I actually believed them. Because I thought we're living in a democracy. This is the United Kingdom. We invented the whole concept, you know, of parliamentary sovereignty, and we spread our model of democracy around the world. I believed them. I stood down as leader of UKIP. I got involved in media and travelling to Australia and America, LBC show, and enjoying life. And, you know, I said I want my life back. And 3 years on, nothing had been delivered. And I realised in February, March this year, we weren't going to leave. All the promises were going to be broken. We were heading rapidly towards a second referendum. Nobody within the Tory party had the guts to stand up and get rid of this appalling leader that we had in the former Theresa May. So I said, right, I am going back into the front lines. But I made a pledge. I said, if I have to do this all over again, I said, next time, it's no more Mr. Nice Guy.
Fantastic.
All right?
Good. So we've got the non-nice Nigel Farage here.
I think what I've done... Well, it's Sunday morning. I think what I've done, I've reset the agenda completely. Boris is saying all the right things, but remember, Theresa May said all the right things. The question here is, can we really trust Boris?
So this is going to be the... So that's the question. Do you trust Boris? Do you think that come October 31st, we'll be sitting here, whatever the Sunday is after that, and saying, woohoo, they've had the no-deal Brexit and they're out? Or will there be something where they've walked it back and it's conditional and the Irish backstop has gotten in the way and Bojo is saying, we just need more time, or something like that?
Well, look, I mean, Boris... So Mrs May did this new deal with Brussels, or a new treaty. It was, I mean, the worst deal in history. It was a shocker. The kind of thing that you'd only sign if you'd been beaten militarily in war and somebody had a gun to your head. It was awful. And Boris twice voted against it, because 3 times this came to the House of Commons. Twice Boris voted against it. He said, if we sign this, we become a slave state, a vassal state. And then the 3rd time of asking, he voted for it. So with Boris, you always think with Boris that it's a little bit more about his career advancement than it is about principle. Against that, what Boris is being told by, and it'll be Linton Crosby and people, the Wizard of Oz, as we call him, and what he will be being told is, if you drop the ball again, Farage will kill you at the next general election. So that's the balance he's got to weigh up. My guess is that the only way he can deliver Brexit is to have an early general election on the issue and get a majority. That's my guess.
Do you do some kind of deal? Because we've seen the two recent by-elections. What's the...
Well, look, I mean, I think the truth of it is, whatever Boris says, there'll be millions of people that say, look, he's entertaining, he's great fun. We'd quite like a private life like his. That is pushing it for a Sunday morning. But do we trust him? And I think the truth of it is that the support the Brexit Party has got, the belief that a goodly number of people have in me is such, I don't think he can win that election without my support. But to get my support, I'm going to have to believe in him, genuinely believe in him, and in the Conservative Party, who've not been Conservative at all for years.
How would that work, though? Because there's no preferential voting in the UK.
No, that's right.
So are we going to get Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister because the Conservative vote's going to be split?
Well, what we saw in Peterborough, and that was a by-election immediately after the European elections, we saw the Labour Party get 31%, the Brexit Party get 30%, the Tory Party get 21%, and there's 51% of the vote between the two of us, and Corbyn wins on 31.
Yeah.
So, here's the logic, right? There are parts of the north of England, for argument's sake, that have sent back Labour MPs since the end of the First World War. And it's kind of tribal politics. They feel like Labour communities, even though they're going to feel very betrayed by Corbyn and the Labour Party giving up on Brexit. They could not bring themselves to vote Conservative if you paid them £100,000. But they can vote for me. And so the argument would be... You
would run in some seats.
If Boris is absolutely sincere and wants to deliver Brexit above everything else and doesn't mind upsetting some in the Conservative Party, who, don't forget, hate me. I mean, I am the devil, which is just, it's always a good thing in life to be judged by your enemies, I think. The logic would be, he says, look, Nigel, there are, I don't know, 80, 90, 100, whatever it may be, Labour seats that voted Brexit, that have been betrayed by the Labour Party. You've got a free run at those. Leave me the rest of the country. And you know what? Even today's opinion polling puts the two of us together on 47% and the Labour Party on 28%. Work it out.
For this to happen, the Tories have to be scared of you. Now, you've got a plan for 600 people?
Absolutely. So look, I mean, at the moment, what I'm doing is this. I announced last week my first 150 candidates and their constituencies, and I will be on the 27th of August holding a big rally in London, and I will stand on the stage, and there'll be 600 men and women around me, and I shall say, this is the People's Army. We are mobilised to fight the next general election. If you don't deliver Brexit, this is it, we're here. And so I agree with you. The only way you get anything out of the British Conservative Party is by frightening the life out of them, by putting the fear of God into them. And I'm going to do that, you mark my words.
If you had this partnership with Bojo, would you have a position in any government? Would you be...
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know.
What would be the position you'd pick?
Well, I was... because President Trump did once tweet that I should be the UK ambassador to Washington. Now, I tell you what, there'd be parties every night. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Quite honestly, what I would like to do... Look, I believe in the English-speaking peoples of the world. I believe in the Commonwealth. I believe in the remarkable relationship that we should have with Australia and New Zealand and Canada and India. And there is still potentially a great relationship there. I would see myself... If the government wanted me to help, I would see myself helping to try to get free trade deals in place with countries like
yours. Well, you speak of that, sorry, James, just quickly, you speak of that. We have here some Australian croissants, so you don't have to go to France anymore.
No.
Australian oranges, so you don't have to go to Spain anymore. You could trade exclusively with Australia. You could have the best camembert, the best red wines.
No,
you don't need
well,
Germany
of course,
or Italy.
we could buy your wines a lot more cheaply than we are at the moment because we put big tariffs on Australian wine. The oranges we'll take. Croissants I have a slight problem with.
Too many in Brussels.
Well, no, I'm the honorary life president and founder of the Anti-Croissant League.
Seriously?
Because that's a European breakfast. I like eggs and bacon.
Excellent. James, where are the eggs and bacon?
Where are they? We need to get American bacon and eggs and maybe a side steak as well. But I want to ask, though, you know, you've been out here, you've been talking about, you gave a speech at CPAC, and what are the themes that we see between the Liberals, who are our supposed conservatives here, and your conservatives back in the UK, and also to some extent the Republicans? Why is it, do you think, that centre-right parties have deserted their centre-right philosophy, underpinnings, foundations, to go in for all of these lefty obsessions, whether it's climate or open borders or whatever it might be? Talk us through what some of the similarities are between what's happened in Britain and, say, Australia and the United States, which gave them Trump.
Well, look, you know, think about politics and where it operates. It happens in capital cities. Also in capital cities, you have mainstream media, you have the metropolitan elite. Politicians and their wives or husbands actually rather like to be invited to the right dinner parties, like to be popular. It's quite difficult in London, for argument's sake, or Washington. If you're taking a tough line on immigration, you won't get invited to the right social parties. So it kind of... people get dragged towards this sort of social democrat centre. And the reason it happened is twofold. One, the growth of career politicians, the genuine career politician, the man or woman who's done nothing in the real world before going into Parliament. And secondly, the real answer is, why have the so-called Conservatives given up on their Conservative bases? Because they could get away with it. Because nobody was challenging them. And that's what's changed.
Until Brexit.
That's what's changed. 2016, we saw Brexit and a challenge. In Italy, we've seen the Conservative Party, Berlusconi's party, almost wiped off the face of the earth by Salvini. In America, Trump just hijacked the Republican Party and took it on a new mission. So what you've seen, really, since 2016, is a reflection of those out in the country who've been ignored by Conservative parties. We are living through a big revolt on the right, and Conservative parties are being reclaimed by their own voters. I think it's a very exciting time we're living through, and you know, there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, well, look, you know, Brexit, Trump, these were just short-term phenomena, but hey, look at the Australian elections. This thing is growing, and the epicenter of all of this is the Brexit debate. Because this is about globalism versus nationalism. This is the dividing line in our politics, and it actually crosses in many ways a lot of the old boundaries of left or right. Either you believe the nation-state is the essential building block, that you preserve your heritage, you defend your communities and your place in the world, or you believe we should be run by, you know, half-drunk bureaucrats in Brussels, people at the UN, or whatever it may be. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Well, you mentioned the Morrison government. I'm interested in your thoughts on the former Prime Minister. You made some interesting comments about Malcolm Turnbull.
Yes. Well, but isn't he classic of what I've just been talking about?
Well, he came over and was he one of the ones who campaigned against Brexit?
Was he ever? Absolutely. Oh, I'm not going to forget that in a hurry. No, I mean, you know, Turnbull, along with Obama, you know, was telling us, don't vote for Brexit, this would be a terrible thing.
Even though it's better for Australia if Brexit happens.
Isn't that the fascination? Clearly obvious that Brexit potentially could be really good. You know, I like Australian wines, I could buy a load more of them, and I'm just one consumer. Yeah, even though it was obviously against the Australian national interest, that's what he argued for, because he's a former Goldman Sachs committed globalist, you know, and that's what's been happening. The Conservative parties, you know, really were taken over by these people, and now, you know, the fight back is well, it's well underway, and we should be excited about it. So I didn't know how to describe your former Prime Minister, and I didn't want to be rude because I was on Australia. I know you're very plain-spoken people here. I thought calling him a snake was quite moderate, really.
What do you think of ScoMo, Scott Morrison? Do you see him as a genuine Conservative, genuine centre-right leader?
I think the jury's out as to exactly which direction he's going to take. I suspect that his instincts are good ones, but again, it comes down to courage. You know, real leaders have courage. Real leaders stand up and say things that in the short term are very unpopular, but in the medium and long term prove to be right. I mean, you know, Mrs. Thatcher, and you've got to picture of her here. And, I mean, Mrs. Thatcher, you know, very often would stand up and say, this is where we're going. This is the direction of travel. And her own party would sit in the House of Commons and swallow hard and examine their toe caps and not quite know what to do.
Churchill too.
But that's leadership. Leadership is about being brave. Leadership is about saying, you know, I'm on a journey, come and join me. Does Scott Morrison have within him the courage to do that? I don't know, but I would have to say this. It's a lot better than where you were.
So good. It was your 18th birthday, April the 3rd, 1982.
It was.
And you had this headline, came up, we'll put it up on the screen, that Argentina had invaded the Falklands. And in the House of Commons, Margaret Thatcher started making commitments and what she was going to say. And I have the quote from Hansard here. Enoch Powell,
yes,
the much maligned Enoch Powell, said, the Prime Minister, shortly after she came into office, received a sobriquet. Sobriquet, is that the right word, Rita? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Good.
Powell would have said sobriquet.
Sobriquet. As the Iron Lady.
Yeah.
And the line that you heard was that in the next week or two, this House, the nation, and the Right Honourable Lady herself will learn of what metal she is made.
I remember that speech. I remember that speech.
How inspirational was Thatcher to you?
Do you know, that morning of the 3rd of... And it was my 18th birthday, just by coincidence, but that morning she called together an inner cabinet of, you know, the very closest, highest politicians in the land, nearly all chinless old Etonians, and they told her it can't be done. It's impossible. The Royal Navy is too small. The Falkland Islands are 8,000 miles away. Winter is coming. The Argentinians have been armed by our colleagues 21 miles across the channel in France with Exocet missiles, and that it was too risky and that it could not be done. And it's a great story, this. Admiral Sir Henry Leach was in London in civilian clothes that Saturday, attending family business, but knew what was going on. Said to a taxi driver, take me to the entrance of the House of Commons. He got there, he had no idea on him whatsoever. He spoke to the policeman. The policeman clearly saw the cut of this man's jib and thought, actually, he is the real deal. And the Admiral gradually worked his way through. And the Prime Minister was told, Admiral Sir Henry Leach is waiting for you outside. And she went out and said hello to him. And he could see from her face that she was being told this can't be done. And Leach said to her, he said, Prime Minister, we have a Royal Navy. It is in situations like this that we use it. He said, then I went beyond what I should have done as a military officer. I said, if you don't do this, this country will never be viewed by the rest of the world as being the same place ever again. And she went in and told the chinless wonders, we're going. But she had courage beyond. I mean...
But you have displayed courage. You have displayed courage time and time again. You've still got the biggest fight of your hands, potentially, in the next 6 weeks or so.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we're headed for an epic autumn. This is going to be, you know, this is big stuff. All the global forces will be against Brexit being completed. They will go to levels of total hysteria in terms of what we call Project Fear. Project Fear is you wake up every morning and switch on the BBC if you can bear to. And they tell you that, you know, companies are going to leave Britain, that we're going to lose millions of jobs, finish up living in caves, plagues of black locusts will come and descend on our land. You know, Project Fear is going to get into full tilt. And, yeah, I'm in this very funny position. I've reset the agenda. You know, very much the ball is now Boris's side of the court. If he shows great courage, if he shows great leadership, if he shows he's prepared to work with me and my supporters, we can get this over the line on the 31st of October, and it can be a fresh start and just a huge victory against the globalists, a huge victory for national democracy.
So the ramifications, give us the global ramifications of this, as well as the European one.
Do you know, it's very interesting, but Donald Trump has believed from day one that his first victory was the Brexit vote, that it was the Brexit vote that gave people hope, and that was kind of why I went and spoke in that presidential campaign, which is an amazing honour for me to go and do that. I mean, a huge thrill to go and do that. And I think if we get a proper Brexit, it will be the end of the European project. And the end of the European project is the end of the globalist project. You know, why is it the Hillary Clintons and others, the Malcolm Turnbulls, they love the Brussels project? Because, frankly, for them, it's the prototype for the kind of world governance that they actually want us all to live under.
The United Nations.
So, yeah, well, it's. I mean, of course, luckily the UN hasn't got too much power. And we need to have and we do need to have a forum where people meet. It's a question of whether we're doing this as nation-states cooperating as friends and neighbours in the world with shared common interests, or whether we're surrendering the ability to make those decisions. This is, I think, for the whole of the Western world, I think this battle over Brexit is absolutely key. But I will say this. Whether this happens on the 31st of October or not, this is going to happen. The genie is out of the bottle. The public have an appetite for this to happen. It is not going to go away.
Who leaves next? Who leaves the EU next? There's talk of Italy. How do you see it?
I think the real crisis that the European Union face is not the mild-mannered Brits. It's the Italians. And I think that you've now had 20 years of no growth in Italy. 20 years of zero growth. It's an incredible thing to think about for a country that, you know, back in the 90s, I mean, you know, when I worked in industry before being in politics, you know, I did a lot of business in northern Italy. They had some great manufacturing companies, a lot going for them. They got tied to the euro. It's a massive mistake to join the wrong currency. They've paid a hell of a price for it. The Greeks, in the face of all of this, just gave up. I don't see the Italians giving up. I think at some point there's going to be a massive rupture between the north and south of Europe. So I think in the end, I think Brexit begins the beginning of the end of the project. I think Italy completes it.
James?
Do countries in the east, Hungary, countries like that, do they wind up pulling further back away from Europe again as well?
It's a funny one, that. So you've got Europe divided north to south by the euro. You know, Germany's, I mean, let's be frank about it. Germany's benefited, everybody else has suffered.
Correct.
All right, particularly the Mediterranean. You know, where you've still got youth unemployment rates of 40, 50% in some of these countries. It's just shocking. The other division in Europe is the East-West division. And you've got, I mean, Hungary, I suppose, in a sense, the lead country, but don't forget Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. And these are very deeply Christian countries. These are very ancient civilizations, and they have major concerns about the kind of immigration that Mrs. Merkel encouraged into the European Union, major concerns about the impact that will have on their Christian culture and their identity. And they are fighting for that, but none of them want to leave the European Union because they keep being given money. You know, and this is the problem. But still, that still poses challenges. I mean, 10 years ago, Libération in France said that Nigel Farage is the European Union's worst nightmare because he wants to leave the European Union. They wrote the other day, Viktor Orban's an even bigger nightmare because he doesn't want to leave. but just be a disruptor.
I just want to get to climate change. And the big disappointment for me of Boris Johnson is he's bought the whole thing. He's gone in hook line. He used to be, when he was a Spectator editor, a climate skeptic. Now he's the full thing. He's in there, changed the climate. Yet this is part of the globalist agenda. So the Tories are really embedded into the globalist agenda. You speak the opposite story. Tell us your thoughts.
Well, look, I mean, I just take this view. I mean, firstly, I was an environmentalist before most of these environmental campaigners were born. You know, I was conscious in the 1980s that we've got to think about the Earth and how we look after it, and I still believe that very strongly. I didn't. Here's a real confession. I did vote Green once.
Hey, you heard it here first on Outsiders. Nigel Farage.
Well, because in those days...
Call security and please.
But in those days, the Greens were Eurosceptic.
Yeah.
The Greens were very Eurosceptic when the Tories weren't particularly, so I did actually vote Green. Look, I think this. We're obsessing about carbon dioxide. I think to the detriment of worrying about real problems like deforestation on a massive scale. Clearly plastic in the oceans, which Sky have done so much to publicise, and good for them. But once we obsess about carbon dioxide, what about nitrous oxide? What about real pollution, rather than obsessing on what is a naturally occurring product on the planet? And I think we do that to our disadvantage. I think what we're doing in order to counter climate change with CO2 taxes has led to one of the biggest transfers of wealth from the poor to rich we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And the absolute truth of it is, when Tony Blair tells you the science is settled, no science is ever settled. All science is always open to interpretation, to debate, and the whole British political establishment have absolutely got in with this. And I think we're in danger down the road of having power blackouts, of making our industry uncompetitive, of making the poor pay way too much for their bills, and all of it. We're quite a big country compared to Australia, but all of it, you know, we produce 1.8% of global carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
It's irrelevant what we do. It's what China does or India does that actually is going to affect.
Absolutely. Sorry, James. Just within 18 months, you could well be the Prime Minister, and God forbid it doesn't happen, but the monarch could at some point be Prince Charles, who has said that within 18 months it's all over, or 5 years.
So he came to the European Parliament 10 years ago to tell us that within 7 years the polar ice cap would disappear completely. And at the end of his speech, I refused to stand. I just sat there like that. All I can say about the Queen and his succession is this. The Queen Mother was a chain-smoking gin drinker who did not look after herself at all and lived to 101. The Queen is 93 and looks fit. May she reign for a very long time.
So I want to ask a question, though. In the next 18 months, we could see Prime Minister Nigel Farage. Now, Brexit happens under you, hard Brexit. Britain is out of that. And you've got the party is Brexit, but what does the rest of the policy look like, especially around foreign policy? How does Britain go it alone? Are we talking multilateral arrangements with the US, strengthening ties with NATO? How does Britain, under NATO, Brexit, sit? I want to hear a bit about that.
I think Britain's place in the world with Brexit is perhaps one of the key considerations that I've got, I'm thinking about and debating already. NATO is under threat. You know, it's been a very successful military alliance. It's been there for over 70 years. The European Union now want to build their own European army. They will destroy NATO. I see an independent United Kingdom actually as being the voice in Europe saying, right, guys, either you start paying the bill for this or it's all over. You know, and I think that's a message that with our friends in the East will resonate.
But what if the EU then says, well, fine, you know, go off on your own and do your own thing. We're going to build our own EU army, and you've got a navy in Britain, in Hormuz that you're trying to deal with.
Well, I think there is a way of dealing with that, and that's to go to Warsaw and Budapest and say, now, guys, you know, if Russia was to turn horrible in the next 20 years, who do you want defending you? America, the UK and NATO, or Mr. Juncker and the boys in Brussels? So I think we can win that argument. I was horrified a couple of weeks ago to hear Jeremy Hunt, when he was still Foreign Secretary, after the British ship had been impounded by the Iranians, to hear him say that no British commercial shipping would go through the Straits of Hormuz until we had a European naval defence force to look after us. I mean, and this is where we've been going. We've been getting this wrong. Look, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, I believe there is an extraordinary bond between the English-speaking peoples of the world, a shared history, a shared heritage, a shared culture. All right, there are things we disagree on, cricket, for example, but we have a hell of a lot in common. And what we did as a country by completely turning our backs on you in the 1970s, in, I think, the most shameful way, is forget who our real friends in the world were. And I want us to rebuild that alliance in terms of military, in terms of security, in terms of trade, in terms of cultural interchange and all of those things. That, I think, is a great future, not just for us, but I think we can bring back together again the family of the English-speaking peoples of this world. Some people say it's sentimental. I don't think it is. I think it's real.
Rita?
I want to ask about your thoughts on Christina Keneally, the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, who was so outspoken about CPAC, helped sell it out.
I love her.
But she... Tell us your thoughts about her and how she characterised this event.
Look, I think what we're seeing, you know, and kind of in a reaction, in a sense, to 2016, in 200 years' time, kids at school will learn about 2016. It was the year that everything changed. And kind of the reaction to, you know, Brexit, Trump, Salvini, all of these things, is that the left have become more and more extreme. You know, we've got Mr. Corbyn with his particularly sort of anti-British, pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic approach. Yep. We've got the Squad over in the States, who the President has great sport with, and you've got Keneally. And we've got to a very funny place. You know, for civilised democracy to work, you need the principle of losers' consent. We've kind of lost that since 2016. And we're now getting into the territory where people like her think that speakers should be banned from coming to Australia, that not just a sort of left-wing campus on a university, but a whole country should become a safe space. We've got a situation in the UK where the new leader of the Liberal Democrats says she wouldn't even accept the result of a second referendum if it said delay. So the left have moved in this very fundamentally, and not even undemocratic, but anti-democratic direction. That's what you saw. I think we should be very pleased about this. I think we should be very bullish about this. I think the more extreme these people get, the more, I call it Middle England, and it's flyover state America, and I'm sure it's sort of outside, you know, Melbourne and Sydney's
quite Australian.
Yeah. You know, and actually, the more extreme the left become, the more unreasonable they become, the more anti-democratic they become. Reasonable people say, do you know what? We've built this country. Our forebears in the 20th century shed much blood to defend this way of life and this democracy. We're not about to be told we can't listen to various speakers. So I think it's great news. The more extreme the left become, the angrier we get, the more people watch outsiders, and the more chance there is of Conservatives and people who believe in the nation-state winning the next election.
Fantastic. Nigel Farage, thanks so much for coming on
Thank
Outsiders.
You.
Now, you've got to leave here. You've got a big job on Wednesday. You've got to support the British cricket team. Good luck, Nigel.
I got to admit, whatever Steve Smith's previous behaviour, he is just the most outstanding cricketer you've produced since Bradman. It is astonishing, and he is just unbelievable to watch. Do you know what? Of course, I want England to win, but above all, I love sport, and he is going to be. It's going to be something else. I'm looking forward to it very much indeed.
Fantastic. I'm still tipping it. Certainly, if not the Prime Minister, very close to the Prime Ministership. Probably the Prime Minister of Britain next year. There you go, Nigel Farage. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Outsiders.
Thank
Have
you.
a great trip home.
Brilliant. Thanks.